Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. I think it should all be working okay. If it's the first time you've watched this, I hope you enjoy it. I do it every week, normally on a Friday, and we'll take a look at the major announcements due out in the markets next week, and then we'll take a look at the major markets, indices, currencies, gold, silver, Bitcoin, some precious metals, FX, oil, a little bit of everything to see where the opportunities might be. And then if there's anything that you want looking at, if you put it in the YouTube chat and we'll take a look at that. It's been a bit of an odd week this week. I think obviously we had the holiday yesterday in the US because of Thanksgiving. So there was that. So the indices were still trading in like the out of hours markets, but the market, the real market, was shut. And today is a half day in the US, so it might be just a bit of a quiet day overall. Let's see. So I didn't do anything yesterday. I probably won't do anything today. I've got a few trades running from last week. I talked about them last time around. That the best one for me at the moment has been the Bund, the European bond. So I've been in that since I don't know when it was, a week last Tuesday, something like that, down here somewhere. So that's run well, that trend's run well. I'm still long the FTSE. It's been a bit sideways since the beginning of this week. I bought down here at the beginning of that trend, and this week I bought the dollar index in here, which has gone against me so far. So it's a little bit of a last ditch really down here to see if it can rally, otherwise I'll get stopped out. And I've done a couple of S&P and NASDAQ trades this week. There might be a trade this afternoon in the Dow. I mean, the Dow is the one that is still moving higher, you know, even though NASDAQ and S&P perhaps a little bit sideways more recently. But we'll take a look at it and look at it all in a bit more detail. I've got the YouTube trading account down here if there's anything we fancy doing. There's those couple of trades from last week. They've done all right, actually. That Euro trade I did in the live stream last week for like a few quid of risk. I think buying that to see if the sell-off was overdone. So that's done okay. So bought down here last Friday, at 3 o'clock last Friday. So that's done okay. And the S&P has not done much at all. Where was that trade done? In here somewhere. When was it? Last Friday again. In there, so that's done all right, but it's been a pretty flat week for US stocks. And if there's anything interesting today, we'll put a trade on and see. But for now, let's just get some of the housekeeping out of the way and we can get into it. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, let's get into it. I did a webinar this week for people in the WhatsApp group on Wednesday of this week. I talked about the trading setups I use for US indices, a new approach I've been trialing in the last 4 weeks that's done okay. Talk about that, where to place stops, when to take profits, the low risk, high reward, false break approach, when not to trade and what's right for you. If you'd like to have access to the recording of that, which is now live, I'll give you the details as we go through today's webinar. It runs for about 50 minutes. Hopefully you find it useful for when it comes to trading. I mean, I use it for US indices, but I think the approach stands up across plenty of different markets. But let's take a look at next week. Monday, we have got US ISM Manufacturing PMI, Purchasing Managers Index. So again, a bit of an inflation type indicator. That could be interesting. I think inflation still a hot enough topic out there. And then on Wednesday, we've got the same, but for the services, Purchasing Managers Index. So again, Monday, Wednesday, a couple of inflation things for the US. Friday, we've got the EU, the Eurozone GDP. So how well or not is the Eurozone economy doing? And the big one for next week is US non-farm payrolls. So the US employment numbers come out next week, an hour before the market opens. So when we do this session next Friday, those will have been out, and we'll see how the market reacts. Quite often, there is what I like to refer to as like a headless chicken effect over the payrolls. We see a big move when the number comes out, and then a lot of the time the market will go back to where it was before the payrolls came out. So it can be volatile, but ultimately directionless. Let's see what next Fridays look like. So that's next week in the US. Okay, let's have a look at the markets. If there's any stuff you want looking at, have a think and put it in the chat. But let's start off with stock markets. US stock markets, boring week is what I would say. The market, this is the S&P. Market gapped open on Sunday night, Monday morning, and then you can see it did push a bit higher as the week went on, but pretty flat overall. So not too exciting week in the short term for US indices. But, as I always say, overall, the trend is up. That's the little trade we did last week. The trend's up, so what are you going to do? Me, I'd be a buyer of the dip. So, I'm very much still buy the dips on US indices, but a pretty boring week this week. I mean, some levels to watch this afternoon. How low did it get on Wednesday before the holiday? This is the S&P, got as low as 59.84. So if the market sold off today, perhaps there's an opportunity there. But with an early finish, with it being a half day in the US, perhaps it ends up being a bit of a boring day today. So let's not waste too much time talking about that. Same for the NASDAQ. NASDAQ gapped open on Sunday, like the S&P did. Broadly sideways and a bit weaker as the week went on. So again, nothing too much exciting there. Below the all-time highs that were set earlier in November. So bleh is what I've got to say about that. Pretty boring week overall. I'd still buy the dip, but yeah, that's it. The most interesting is arguably the Dow. The Dow has this week on Wednesday before the holiday did make another all-time high. So the Dow, this again, I talk about this a bit now and again in the WhatsApp group I run, that it shows the difference between various sectors of the US market. The S&P is still strong, but hasn't made an all-time high this week. The NASDAQ is still below its all-time high from a few weeks ago, and the Dow is still making all-time highs. So different makeups, obviously, to these indices, and we are seeing them performing in different ways. So perhaps if I had to do a trade this afternoon, the market I would be looking at would probably be the Dow, and I would buy the dip on the Dow, and I would want my stop. I don't know. Where would I want my stop? At least below Wednesday's low, 44,680, or actually probably below Tuesday's low. So if there was a really deep sell-off this afternoon, it could be an opportunity. But otherwise, I think it's just a boring end to the week. It's one of those weeks. There's a holiday in it. It can't always be exciting, and it has just been one of those weeks really. So fairly uneventful in those markets. FTSE, I'm long the FTSE at the moment. It's a boring market, the FTSE though. The FTSE's been pretty sideways since May of this year. I mean, the trend is up, going back to the COVID lows. The trend is up on the FTSE. It's just been a pretty boring 6 months. So I'm still long. I've got a trailing stop on the trade. That's it really. Will it get back up to here? 8,400 and a bit, maybe. Let's see what happens. But not too exciting, that market, as far as I'm concerned. The Aussie index, I'm still long the Australian index. I put a trade on in May, and it went nowhere for a long time, and it has started getting a move on, well, since August. I mean, the trend is up, in the Aussie index, all-time highs. It was interesting whenever we looked at it. I mean, the reason I did the trade back then in May was this breakout that we saw March, April, through these old highs, 76.50 or thereabouts on the Aussie index. And it's been, a bit volatile at times, but it has pushed higher. So that's still positive. The European markets, I mean, this is the DAX. I mean, it is positive. The trend is up. It's had a bit of a sort of wobbly 6 weeks or so. Nothing too exciting there until it breaks out again. The French index has really sold off. off those May highs. I did do a few trades on that in August. Maybe interesting next week if we get near this 7,000 level again from August. Do we get the bounce? But European indices again, doing reasonably differently to the US indices at the moment. They are not as strong as the US indices. So let's see what next week brings. Japan index is a bit boring, I think. We had that crazy move in the summer where it dropped 30% in less than a month. It's bounced back, but it's been a bit sideways since then. And then the Hong Kong, I want to be a buyer of the Hong Kong index, but it's still weak for now. I wonder, is this big trend, this downtrend over? Are we seeing a new trend building? Blah, 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 blah. To me, it still feels like it's drifting a bit. So not much to do at the moment. So that's it really. A bit boring, I'd say, for stock market indices. But when the US gets back into work mode again next week, that for me, it will be a big part of my focus. In the mornings, I look at a bit of everything and try and put a trade on. That's where, I'm in that Bund trade from a week ago and in the dollar trade from earlier this week. And in the afternoons, that's when I just focus on the US market. So it's been a quiet 3 days for me because it has all been quiet, but I expect it to get back to normal next week. But nothing too exciting to say about those at the moment. What should we look at next? Dollar index. I'm long the dollar index with a stop about 30 points under today's low, the low so far. And I bought it earlier this week because there was a breakout. Whenever it was it last Friday? Last Friday there was a breakout and it hit 2-year highs. So I was wondering, is this going to be a real breakout or is it a false breakout? And of course you never know. You don't actually know until after the fact. But I bought the dip back on Monday, or was it Tuesday? Whenever it was. And the market has been sliding since. So I've been the wrong side of that, but my stop is the other side of 105.50 on my chart. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that next week. So I'm hoping that it builds some sort of a base here and we see a recovery next week. But for now, that trade hasn't gone the right way. But of course, they don't all go the right way. That is trading. So that's those done. A quick word about bonds. We don't talk about bonds that often, but I think it's an interesting market at the moment. I mean, I'm in the Bund trade, which has been a cracking trend. But if you look at the likes of UK gilts, they've been trending higher. T-bonds is the big one. The US bond, that's been trending higher, and I just wonder, we have had, years of decline in the bond markets from 2020 here. This year's been a bit more sideways. And I wonder, is everything, are the bonds building a base again? And should I be a buyer? And I think I should. I mean, I've bought the Bund, but I think if T-bonds sold off and held above these old lows, which are actually, they are the lows for the year. Interesting market to watch. And, I don't know much about bonds. To me, it's a market like any other. It goes up, it goes down, there's trends, there's support and resistance. But I think that's an interesting market to watch. And so far, at least, this Bund trade has been a great trade for me. So we'll see. We'll see what next week brings in those. So that could be an interesting market. So that's those. Gold, I'd still be a buyer of the dip in gold. The big trend on gold, if we went back to, September last year, for me that trend is still up. So I'll be a buyer of the dip. The only question is, where does my stop go and all of that stuff. So at the moment, if I was a buyer based off the dailies, I'd put a stop under 2,470, something like that. But, I think that's been, it's been a bit of a, it has been recovering for most of this week. It was a big sell-off on Monday. It's still down on the week. Is that this week? Yeah. So it ended last week around 2,715. It has traded more than $100 lower this week, but it has been trying to claw it back. So, I still be a buyer of the dip on gold. Silver's interesting. I don't look at silver very often because it can be a bit of a crazy market, but I mentioned it in the WhatsApp group yesterday because we had this. The trend in silver has been up, as with gold this year. It hit a multi-decade high in whenever it was. I don't know. When was that? October? Yeah, October. sold off, and it's held above this 29.70 level over the last couple of days. So if I wanted to buy silver, this is like a good place to buy. So if I was a buyer today, should we do that trade? Should we get a trade on early? Let's see. Let's put a trade on with silver and see how it all works out. Let's go. Silver. So I want to be a buyer. What did I say? Where would my stop go on silver? Probably under here to give it a bit of wiggle room. What was that low? 27. Let's say 27.50. So I'm going to be a buyer. So this is real money. It's just we'll just do it small because it's my YouTube account and not my actual account. So let's do 0.2 on silver. The broker I use, I'll talk about it at the end, but there we go. I like it because I can trade through the charts like this. So I'm going to be a buyer at 30.55, stop at 27.50. Is that low enough? Yeah, that's low enough. Let's do it. Buy it. Done. There we go. I think that's an interesting market, silver. Because the trend has been up. If I go back to that other chart, the trend has been up. And interesting to see if it gets a bit of a move on from down here. But of course, if it sells off, if the dollar rallies next week, that will put pressure on silver. But let's see how that one turns out. I think that's interesting. So that's that. Oil. Let's have a look at oil and gas. Oil has been pretty boring as well. I talked about this last week. This, again, if you thought, well, oil is a buy, this is the place to buy it. It's on an 18-month low. This sort of $64 to $67 a barrel area has been big support in the past. The market has rallied off here. So if it's going to bounce from anywhere, here we are. What would make me a bit concerned is the fact it's just hanging around down here. We're not seeing much of a movement away. And it's a bit of a boring market, oil. But interesting to see if these old levels hold, down at these lows. It had a rally and it sort of lost it from Monday. And it's just been bobbling around since then. So interesting to see if it holds. If it breaks, below, that does suggest that perhaps the next big move could be lower. So not the most exciting market again at the moment, oil. But that's where we are. I think there are some interesting levels to watch down here. I haven't traded it for a while because there's been no trend. It's all just been a bit choppy and boring. So that's that. Natural gas. A pretty volatile week for natural gas. Of course, when everything else is dead, you can always rely on natural gas to provide some excitement. So it did trade as high on Friday as 341. It's been as low as 304 yesterday. So what's that? 37. About a 12% range this week in natural gas. Not really doing anything. I mean, it's been a good run for November. It's gained 50% in November. But in the great scheme of things, it is sideways for the year. So I think pretty much the same as I said last week. If I had to do a trade on natural gas, I'd be a seller with a stop above those old highs. Let's see what happens. So that's that. 350. Let's call it 350 as the level to watch in natural gas. Might be interesting next week. So that's that. Bitcoin, the trend is up. Obviously, in Bitcoin, we're just below. Where did it get to? It came within $200, according to my chart, of 100,000. Interesting to see if 100,000 gets broken. If it does get broken, I would expect perhaps a bit more upness for Bitcoin. But interesting, again, pretty volatile. That's a 10% move from last Friday into Wednesday, and bang, back up again. I mean, obviously we know it is a volatile market, the old Bitcoin. So let's see what happens with that. But the trend is still up, so I'll be a buyer of the dips. And in the currencies, so much depends on what happens with the US dollar. But this is pound against the dollar, which has been sliding since end of September. So that's 2 months now. I did wonder if this latest rally was a selling opportunity. We've seen a bounce back off the lowest it had been since May of this year. And this 127.70 area. Let's call it 128. Let's round it up. Had been a bit of a problem on the way down. So I wondered if the rally had run out of steam. Let's see. Again, let's see what happens next week. Euro dollar, we did that trade last week. on the euro against the dollar. Oh, I'm making 96 pence already on my silver trade. What a fantastic trading insight that was. But I bought the euro dollar last week, just wondering if the sell-off had been overdone. It has bounced back, but again on euro against the US dollar, has the bounce back gone far enough now? And we'll see this market turn down. So interesting. It did. It was weak. The euro. It hit its lowest last week for 2 years. Let's see what happens. But again, all of this stuff is dollar dependent. So it's been, overall a little bit of a dull week, I would say. If we have a look at just a couple of other markets, what has been moving is the old coffee. Look at that. What a great trend that has been in coffee since October last year. So coffee's gone from about 142 to currently 324. So more than doubles. Big move on Wednesday. It was shut yesterday. Has opened again today. Opened at all-time highs and has reversed again. But again, coffee. I'd be a buyer of the dip on coffee. Orange juice is breaking out. It's had quite a few false breakouts. Orange juice again. It's a great run in 2022 through to about 2024, May 24. Bit sideways since then. Is this the start of the next big level in big run? In coffee. Well, let's see. No, not coffee, orange juice. But we had these false breakouts here, quite frustrating. But we have had a move that has carried on so far since then. So that's maybe interesting. The commodities are on the move again. And cotton was the other thing. What was cotton? Where's it gone? I wondered if cotton was trying to make a base. Let's have a look. Here we go. So, cotton, I had traded this a bit on the way up back here from 2020 into 22. That's a massive run on cotton from like 49 whatever to 150. So that tripled, then slid, then all got a bit scrappy. And I just wondered this week if we're seeing, is coffee making a base again ahead of these old lows around 65, 66. So a bit more of a calmer market than coffee, but I thought cotton was interesting. So that's it. So what to watch? For the rest of today, for me, not very much. Perhaps the Dow. There is an opportunity in the Dow if that pulls back. But otherwise, it's a half day in the US today because of the Thanksgiving. So perhaps we're going to have a boring end to the week and it all gets a lot more interesting again next week. So for the indices, I'd still be a buyer of the dip. I think that's interesting. The dollar index, the trade is against me at the moment. If it's going to bounce from anywhere in the short term, perhaps this is the place. Let's see what happens going into that. And the bond markets just in general, because I think if we look at the big picture on bonds, I think it's quite interesting, the moves over the last week or so to see if this slide from September is over. So one of the dullest weeks I think we've had for a while, but they can't always be exciting, and the holiday in the US obviously impacted on that, but I'm sure it'll all get back to normal next week. So what I'll do now, if there's anything you want to look at, let me know. A quick commercial break. I run a WhatsApp group. I've run it for more than 18 months, nearly 2 years now. I do a daily update in the morning of the whole load of different markets like today. And then in the afternoon, talk about the US markets and the levels I'm looking for in the US. I talk about markets I'm watching, trades I'm running, so I do mention the trades when I've done them in the group. There's a running Q&A session. So you can try the WhatsApp group if you go to the website. All the links are in the description. And if you use the code YouTube, you get 20% off the first month. And you'll get access to that webinar that I ran earlier this week that runs for about 50 minutes. That's a snapshot of what the WhatsApp group looks like. I run some trading courses, 5-star Trustpilot reviews, and a newsletter. Go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. The newsletter's free of charge. You can sign up on the front page of the website. To find out who I trade with, if you sign up through me, you get invited to webinars and stuff. And if you go to bit.ly/David Trade, you can click through and try out the trading platform. And I like it because I can link it, like you saw, I can link it into, like with this silver trade, I can link it into TradingView. I use TradingView for all my trading now. It shows me where I've bought. It shows me where my stop is. I can close the trade, direct from here. You can trade really small, so you don't need to take on massive levels of risk, which has been useful for me trying out this new approach for indices, or this additional approach to indices. So like I say, to try out that and tie it all up to TradingView, go to bit.ly, David Trades. It's a regulated trading company based in the UK. I'm not your account manager, but if you would join under me, then you get access to the webinars and stuff that I run. That's all of that, and all the links are in the description down below. Okay, let's take a look at what we want to have a look at. What's your opinion of MicroStrategy? Is that the company that is heavily invested in Bitcoin? I think it is, isn't it? I think it's I keep seeing it in the news. A Bitcoin gamble. There we go. It's how it's being referred as. Massive Bitcoin accumulation. So I don't know the ins and outs of it. It's accumulated $37 billion in Bitcoin through zero interest convertible bonds. Blah 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 blah. So anyway, so is it a software company that is that's turned itself into a Bitcoin hedge fund? I don't know, but clearly the rise in value of Bitcoin has driven up this company's price. So it's a play on Bitcoin, isn't it? Really, if they own $37 billion of Bitcoin, if Bitcoin halves in the next 3 months, that's going to have an impact on their share price, and vice versa if it doubles, isn't it? So that's the trade, So would you go short? If I went short now, I would want to stop above the highs. The highs from just last Thursday are $542. Is it $542? Yeah. So, but just on that day, one day it went 542 to 371. It's a 30% range on the day. As usual, that is a stock that is far too volatile for me. That is, I've got no interest in these crazy stocks. So for me, I'd probably still be a buyer of the dip, but it's very much linked to what's going on in Bitcoin, so you need to bear that in mind if you're trading that one. What are your thoughts on the Santa rally? I don't really have any. The Santa rally is a thing. Year end, is traditionally good for stock markets. Here we go. Understanding the Santa Claus rally. The average returns for the S&P, the Dow and the Nasdaq have been 1.3, 1.4, 1.8%. 13 weeks with a positive return, 5 with a negative return. Santa Claus rally, increase in the stock market. It's the run up to Christmas, isn't it? So I think it's always a bit fluffy around when it actually starts and all of that sort of stuff. So this is saying the final 5 trading days of the year. Others will have a look at the beginning of December. I never look at it really, but it is a thing. If you want to find out more about it, Google Santa rally. But for me, I don't really care about it. Boeing. Has Boeing bottomed out at 140? It just keeps getting hit, this, doesn't it? I would be looking to sell it still. I thought last year, I think I said it before, that perhaps this was the bottom when they had all that bad news about the plane doors falling off and all of that sort of stuff. But it's carried on sliding, hasn't it? And so for me, I would be a seller of the rally in Boeing. I'd probably want my stop above 180. But yeah, for me, the trend is down. So I think I'd rather be a seller than a buyer of that one. What's the Dow doing? It's not doing much. It's a bit quiet, isn't it? Otherwise, that's it, isn't it? I think. Otherwise, we're all done. Yeah. So, like I say, quiet week. Probably not much for me today to do. I might buy the Dow if it sells off a bit more. But with the old Yanks on holiday, it's I think it's gonna be a fairly quiet end to the week. So let's see what next week brings. That silver market is interesting, because on the dailies, that is a classic buy the dip. Silver is a bit of an odd market, spends an awful lot of time doing not very much, then has a bit of an explosion, and then goes back to boring again. But let's see how that all works out. I'm going to wrap things up there. I'll be back next week. To find out more about the stuff I do, join the WhatsApp group to have access to that seminar. Try out the company I trade with. I can heartily recommend them. I've been trading them for a couple of years. Tight spreads, small trading cost, all of that. Go to bit.ly/David Trade. Otherwise, we're all done. So I'll be back next Friday. We'll take a look at the payrolls, see what's going on then. If you're in the US, I hope you're having a lovely Thanksgiving. If you're in the rest of the world, I think we can have a quiet end to the week. Enjoy the weekend, and see you all next week.